Hi, this is Kathi Quinn with Floriani. Floriani is a division of R&K Distributing, and I want to welcome you to this week's Project of the Week. Well, I hope your holidays were wonderful. I hope your new year is just fantastic, and I look forward to January. I look forward to January and Floriani software. If you think it's fun and exciting now, give me a couple more weeks and wait till you see what's coming. But I wanted to talk to you today about patterns, about motif fills. I used a lot of motif fills over the holidays. I did a lot of texturizing of fabrics. I did some quilting with motif fills. There is so much you can use them for. Decorative effect, making your own fabric. There is so much to use them for, but I don't know that we have a real good understanding of how they work. So I thought this would be a very good opportunity to show that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my artwork tool so I can get myself a shape, and I'm going to just grab the rectangle. I know I have it because it's stuck to my cursor. Hold down your left mouse key and drag. How do we know it's artwork? Well, I use the artwork tool. My properties tells me it's artwork, and in my sequence view it tells me it's artwork. So right now I don't have any stitches. So I'm going to come to the word transform. I did a lot of pot holders, did a lot of stuff in the hoop for the holidays. So let's look at this. Let's do an 8 by 8. And I'm going to apply. Now let's just fit this to screen. So now using my zoom, I just brought it down and said to fit, so I can see all 8 by 8 inches on the screen at once. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a motif fill and work with it a little bit. Now to do that, I'm going to come straight down to the bottom here, and I'm going to come to my third star, which is my motif fill, and simply left mouse click on it. Now what it's going to do is it's going to take my artwork, and it has now turned it into a fill stitch. You can see that obviously in the square. You can see in my properties that it's brought me right to all my fine tuning, and in my sequence view it's telling me, Kathi, this is now a fill. Now let's talk about how these fills are built, how we work with them. Now there is default patterns made in the software, and the pattern size is 5 millimeters. That's just under 1/4 of an inch. So let's go to actual size. Drop down your box and say 1:1. That means that this is just under 1/4 of an inch, this pattern. Well, that's fine if you're looking to texturize something as far as covering the fabric with thread and making it look like a textured total embroidery. What if you're going to use this, say, to use some heat and shrink? Heat and shrink is a product that you can put behind any fabric, and then you could stitch a large pattern on it. Then when you go steam it, the heat and shrink will shrink, and it will cause your fabric to puff and texture. I do this a lot with silk. There is nothing prettier than doing little girls' purses and stuff out of silk. Well, what I want to do is make it look like I've done a whole lot of work. So I will come and texturize that silk first to make it look like I've done a whole lot of stuff on this. A little girl's bodice on her dress is beautiful using heat and shrink to create the fabric before cutting it out. Anita Good has some designs that the animals look like they made out, they're puffy. Well, you use heat and shrink to get that effect. So let's talk about that first. Now, first to do that, this is way too small. But I want to caution you, or teach you, not caution, teach you how to enlarge these patterns but not lose the integrity of the stitch. So let's say I did want to make this, use this texture for something large. I'm going to make it 1 inch. Instead of being less than 1/4 of an inch, I want this to be a full inch. So I'm going to apply. So now this is 1 inch. Now let me zoom in so you can see my stitch ins. Right here are your stitch points. You can turn this off and on. I'm going to turn it off, and I'll show you the difference. This shows you where the needle will penetrate the fabric. So let me zoom in here. And you, of course, can't see any. So let's turn that feature on. Now notice these little bumps. This means the needle's going to go in, the needle's going to go in, the needle's going to go in. Well, I have enlarged this pattern. So let's measure. I'm going to get my ruler on the left-hand toolbar by left mouse clicking. I'm going to put my cursor on the bump, the little knot, hold down my left mouse key and go to the next one. Now this is over 1/2 inch. That means the needle's going to go in, pick up the thread, and move over 1/2 inch before it attempts to pick up the thread again. And it's not going to do it. You've all enlarged stuff and you can't figure out why, especially you see this with lettering. You'll blow up a letter and it'll pick up on one side and your machine will go ch, ch, the needle will go in and come up, but it never catches the bobbin. Because of the distance of the revolution of a bobbin, your machine cannot stitch a stitch over 12.3 millimeters wide. So if it's wider than that, the needle's going to go in, but it's not going to be able to pick up that bobbin thread. It's just going to make a ch-ch noise as it's taking the movement across. And of course, even if it did, you'd have a big loopy stitch that would catch on everything and would not hold its integrity. So how do we correct this problem? Well, we have to tell it, I need this stitch length. Now, it's got a stitch length in here, but that stitch length was set with the original pattern size. So now I'm going to come in and say, I want you to drop that needle every 4 millimeters. Put your 4 in, apply. Now do you see it's going to drop, just like it should. If you do not set your stitch length, it's not going to change. If you change one, you've got to change the other. What's the difference between 4 and 0.4? In this software, none. One is a point, one is millimeters, and it equals the same thing. So you can put 4, 5, 6, you're fine. Or 0.456. It's the same difference the software understands. So you can change the stitch length. If I was going to do this over batting, I would probably change this to a 5. Because I'm going through batting, I'm going up and down, and I can handle a longer stitch length. So this is where you are going to make sure the integrity of this pattern holds. If you forget to do that, you're going to wonder what's wrong with your pattern, or you're going to see some gaping stitches because you may not have made it too big to stitch, but you made it too big to hold its integrity. Now let's get another one real quick, or we don't need to. Here, let's just change let's change this. Now here is one I like to use a lot. I like to use cross hatching. A lot of times when I quilt a pot holder, I like this cross hatch. Now of course it came up to its default pattern size. The pattern of this diamond is, the diamond is a little over 1/8 of an inch in size. The stitch length is a 5 millimeter stitch length. Now if I was going to use this to say quilt, to make it look like cross hatching on a pot holder, I would have some Insul Bright, 2 pieces of fabric. Well, I'm going to want this probably at least 1 inch on an 8x8 pot holder. Now again, I can apply that, but notice, let's zoom in. Oh, I'd already changed it. I'm sorry. I've already changed the stitch length once in here, so it knows I'm working. So make sure, though, that you change that stitch length. Make sure you have affected that, so that's going to drop, or it's going to go here, and it's going to go here. So you'll see that as an issue. Since I just regenerated the same screen, I didn't have an issue. So let me show you why you would have an issue. If you were starting fresh, and I do recommend starting fresh. I don't recommend regenerating over and over on a screen, because sometimes you just get something caught from a setting you had prior that you might not have wanted. So let's come down. Let's go to my crosshatch. Let's apply. Okay, so let's zoom in. Come here, zoomer. Doesn't want to pick up for me. Tell you, sometimes. There we go. Okay, so you can see I've got a stitch. Of course, now this is a little. So let's change this pattern to 25 millimeters. You notice I didn't get any of those other stitches. I still only have a stitch here and a stitch here. Remember, you've got to change and regenerate your length as well. So you've got those stitch points that you need so this pattern will hold its integrity. Let's look at a couple of other things on here. Now, this pattern is very useful, extremely useful. Now, I love this pattern because, again, it's got great cross-hatching. It's also a wonderful pattern for basting. Now, why would I want to baste using a pattern? Because I don't want to have to draw out the basting all myself. When do we use this type of thing? Well, for instance, if I'm making a burp cloth and I've got those 6-layer diapers, you cannot stabilize those so you don't have shifting between those layers. It's impossible. So what you want to do is baste underneath your design first to hold that all together. Now you've got a couple of options. You can baste just under the design and the design will cover the basting stitches and you don't have to worry about pulling them out. Or you can put water-soluble bobbin thread in, baste, then do your design over the top, spritz the back, and the basting thread will dissolve, and then the extra stitches just pull off the top very easily. That is really my favorite method when I'm doing a windbreaker that's got 2 or 3 layers. You know, you've got your liner and your windbreaker. If I'm doing a coat that's kind of fluffy with 2 or 3 layers, I like to use water-soluble thread. I baste the entire area that I'm going to be stitching over so I don't have to worry about shifting. Another time you would use this that was really good is if you're doing faux fur, fake stockings, heavy minky, anything with a lot of fuzzy. What happens a lot of times when you put a name, and we're talking about names, not so much designs, but if I put the name and it's David, I've got a cutout in the D, a cutout in the A, a cutout in the V, a cutout in the little d. So those are all places where that fur starts poking through and obliterating my name as well as in between the letters. So if you take this pattern and you don't make it an inch, you would probably make it maybe, I don't know, I would probably make it about, I'd probably make it about 0.8. I would make it a lot, oh, I'm not thinking straight, excuse me. We've made a mistake and it's going to make this think for a little bit because I tried to make it way too small. I didn't mean 0.8. Maybe a 0.25. Now that's 1/4 of an inch, so we're looking at about let's make it a 6. See how that looks. Okay, so a 6, an 8, no point in front of it, right in there. Now what I'm doing here is I am going to stitch this just underneath my lettering. So I would adjust this to the size of the length of my lettering. Let's say my lettering is 1 inch tall and 3 inches long. I would make 1 inch by 3. I would put this down. Then I would put my name over the top of it. Now what's going to happen is you are going to match your thread to your faux fur, your minky, whatever your fuzzy is. And you are going to stitch it down. And it's going to kind of mat that down for you. Then you're going to put the name over the top. Because this is at an angle, it's kind of going to slip in there too. It's not just going to sit there and blare at you. But with the name over the top, it will keep that looking crisp and professional. And that's how commercial embroiderers do it. They don't leave all that stuff fuzzing out and sticking out. So there's a lot of uses to use these things and work with them. Now let's come back in here and let's say I'm going to make this about 30 millimeters, which is over 1 inch. We're holding our integrity because we've already changed this once, so it's holding in here. So we've got, whoops, when you do that, I moved my cursor too fast and I undocked my toolbar, double click on it and it'll lock back into place. Now it's held its integrity, we can see that. Now let's look at a couple of other things on here. Now when you have this, let's look at how this is going to stitch. It's going to start over here. Fine, I like that. It worked just perfect. But I want to show you, if we want to look at this, let's look at how it's been made. I'm going to click on my shape tool and I'm going to look here and see. Well, the first thing is I want it to start and stop over here. So I'm going to take my start point and I'm going to move it over here. Now let me tell you something. If you do not right mouse click on the screen, that did not actually happen. I moved it, but I didn't tell the software to save it. So remember, once you've moved or affected this, right mouse click on screen. Now let's see how it stitches, see if I like that better. I do. I liked how it stitched better. Let's come back in here. Let's get this again. Now also, what if I wanted to do some basting that wasn't crosshatched, just a baste? I can change the angle. So that's more like just a grid basting. If I want to just grid baste, something I wanted to pull out easy, I can, by changing the angle, I can just grid baste it. So you can come in and you can do all kinds of stuff playing with this. And play with it, look at it, see how you like it, see what you're looking to do. But the most important thing to remember with working with patterns is, number one, if you change your pattern, make sure you update your stitch length. Realize you can make your patterns as open as you want, as closed as you want, but you always want them to hold their integrity. I love this, like I say, for doing the pot holders, for quilting stuff together so it has that pretty professional quilted look, and it didn't take me any real work. I also use this for the regular basting stitch, just like I told you. But you can have a lot of fun with a lot of these patterns, looking at what can I do, how can I affect them, where do they go, and look at them. Look at them and play. Don't just, enjoy what you've got. And you can't hurt. You can come in here and look at something, especially with doing that texturizing. This one is great for texturizing. This F76, I'm going to apply. Now that's a small pattern, so I don't want it small. I want to create a texture or create a light over stitching on some fabric. This works real good. Let me tell you a place this works really nice. If you're doing something like a shower curtain, let's say you wanted to put a big letter on a lighter fabric, a very large monogram. Well, the first problem you're going to have is the weight. So what I prefer to do is I turn it into an applique. But I don't want it to just look appliqued. I want it to have an embroidered feel. So when I turn it into an applique, I will go ahead and take that applique shape, be it a Q, I'm a Quinn, and I would put a texture over the top of that fabric and make it very large so it still had the glisten and the look of a embroidery, but really it's just fabric with some little bit of thread on it to give me that visual. So look real close at your textures, play with your textures, find out all the fun you can have with texture, and just remember just a few little key things. Always set your stitch length when you changed it. Look at your starts and stops if you don't like how it stitches. Also, change the angles if you want to just see what could I do if I changed an angle. And all I do when I change this angle is I've been hitting enter. Enter. So you can come in here and have some fun. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about this motif texture and what you can do and why. I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great New Year's, have a safe New Year, and I look forward to it. Bye-bye.